My dad's 60th birthday was supposed to be his celebration, not the day my entire family would learn the truth about me. For 10 years, I'd maintained this careful facade, the struggling artist who could barely make rent. My sister Caroline never missed a chance to remind everyone how I'd wasted my education on a creative career while she climbed the corporate ladder at her prestigious firm. That night at Montclair's, the most expensive steakhouse in Boston, she was in rare form, whispering to her husband and our cousins about my thrift store dress and how I probably couldn't even afford the appetizers. What she didn't know was that I owned that restaurant and 15 others across New England. What she didn't know was that my struggling artist persona was carefully constructed to avoid exactly what my family had always valued most: being used for money. The moment my black card declined and the manager personally approached our table, everything was about to change. Some truths can't stay buried forever, especially when your sister has spent a decade stepping on you to feel taller. Growing up in Wellesley, Massachusetts, our family was the picture of upper-middle-class New England life. My father, Richard Bennett, built a moderately successful accounting firm that afforded us comfortable lives, while my mother, Margaret, maintained our social standing through charity committees and country club memberships. But beneath our vineyard vacations and prep school educations ran a current of status anxiety I didn't fully understand until adulthood. Caroline, 3 years my senior, embraced the family ethos perfectly. Valedictorian, Dartmouth undergraduate, Harvard MBA. She married James, a surgeon from a good family, and delivered 2 perfectly timed children with perfectly preppy names. Every milestone precisely calculated to enhance the Bennett family brand. I was the family disappointment. I had the grades and test scores, but lacked Caroline's killer instinct. While she networked at campus events, I spent nights in the art studio. When I chose RISD over Princeton, my parents acted like I'd committed a capital offense. "Artists starve, Alexandra," my mother would say. "Is that what you want for yourself?" There was the Thanksgiving when I was 22. I'd come home with my portfolio, excited to show my family the illustrations that had earned me my first gallery showing. Caroline was celebrating her promotion at Goldman Sachs. As I laid out my work on the dining room table, my father glanced over briefly while my mother winced at the charcoal smudges on the tablecloth. Caroline picked up one drawing, examined it with theatrical scrutiny, and asked, "How much could you possibly get for these? $5? 10? When I quietly mentioned the gallery was selling them for several $100s each, she laughed. "Oh, honey, someone's taking advantage of you. No one pays real money for doodles." My father cleared his throat and changed the subject to Caroline's new company car. The summer after college graduation proved even worse. At a family barbecue, Uncle Robert asked about my plans. Before I could answer, Caroline interjected. "Alex is still figuring things out. Not everyone can have their life together at 22. My cousin snickered. Even at my lowest financial point, the humiliation stung worse than the empty bank account. What no one knew was that I'd already sold my first app design, a simple interface for medical scheduling that I'd created for a class project. A healthcare startup bought it outright, $150,000. I kept it quiet, partly from shock, partly from a growing suspicion about my family's values. 6 months later, I partnered with a former classmate to build a design firm specializing in user experience for healthcare and financial technology. Within 3 years, we'd grown to a team of 30 with clients across the country. By year 5, we'd expanded internationally and were being courted by major tech companies for acquisition. When the buyout came, it was life-changing money. 9 figures life-changing. I signed the papers alone in a downtown Boston office, then went back to my modest apartment and ordered takeout. The only person who knew was my business partner, Mark. The grand gesture began as an impulse. I was on a business trip to New York when I spotted the perfect property, a historic brownstone in Boston's Back Bay that my parents had always admired but could never afford. With my new wealth, purchasing it was simple. I planned to gift it to them for their retirement, finally proving my worth in terms they could understand. But something held me back from revealing everything. Each family gathering, as Caroline showcased her promotions and possessions, I found myself playing along with their perception of me as the struggling artist. It became a strange experiment. Would they love me differently if they knew? Would respect replace pity? And more disturbingly, did I want to be loved for my bank account the way Caroline was lauded for hers? The secret grew larger each year, as did my actual fortune: restaurant investments, tech startups, real estate. My modest freelance design work was a convenient cover for my increasingly frequent business trips and unusual schedule. No one questioned why I'd disappear for weeks, then seem unconcerned about money despite my supposedly precarious career. By the time Dad's 60th birthday approached, I owned properties in 4 countries and had a net worth that would have made Caroline's Goldman salary look like pocket change. Yet to my family, I remained poor Alex, the creative one who just couldn't get her life together. Dad's milestone birthday had been in Caroline's planning pipeline for months. The group text messages started in February, a constant stream of Caroline's directives about contributions, dress codes, and gift coordination. She'd selected Montclair's, Boston's most exclusive steakhouse, where reservations typically required months of advance notice. "I pulled some major strings to get us in," she wrote. "James golfed with a client who knows the honor. Everyone needs to dress appropriately." The last comment was followed by a private text to me. "Alex, that means no artistic statements. Just wear something normal for once." What Caroline didn't know was that I'd purchased Montclair's and 3 other premier Boston restaurants as part of a hospitality group investment 2 years earlier. I rarely visited my own establishments to maintain anonymity, but I made exceptions for the quarterly meetings with management. Thomas, the manager who'd worked there for 15 years, was one of the few people who knew my actual position. The week before Dad's birthday, Caroline sent another group message detailing our expected contributions. "I've covered the private dining room deposit, $5,000, so everyone else needs to chip in. Mom's handling the cake, I've arranged for a pianist, and I'm giving Dad the Rolex we discussed. Alex, since I know things are tight for you, just bring a card and maybe put together one of your little art things. Dad always says it's the thought that counts." My actual gift for Dad was arranged months earlier, a fully restored 1965 Mustang convertible, identical to the one he'd owned in college. It was being delivered to their house the following day with a simple card, "From Alex." I wondered how Caroline would explain that away. As the evening of the celebration arrived, I dressed carefully in a modest black dress, actually a custom Valentino that cost more than Caroline's monthly mortgage, and added a simple pendant necklace, disguising the 5-carat diamond as costume jewelry with a matte setting. The irony of disguising luxury as affordability wasn't lost on me. I arrived at Montclair's 15 minutes early, nodding subtly to Thomas at the host station. He performed his role perfectly, treating me like any other guest while discreetly ensuring everything was prepared exactly as I'd instructed. Caroline arrived moments later, resplendent in a designer dress with conspicuous logos, wrists jangling with tennis bracelets. "Oh, Alex, you made it on time, and you look nice. Is that dress new?" "Thrift store find," I lied smoothly. $20. She visibly relaxed. "Well, it's presentable enough. James and I got Dad that Rolex we discussed, 18-karat gold with his initials engraved. What did you manage to pull together?" "Just a card and a small surprise," I replied. Caroline's smile tightened. "Well, Dad will appreciate whatever you can afford. Not everyone can give substantial gifts." The family arrived in scheduled waves. Mom and Dad, my aunts and uncles, cousins with their spouses. Each greeted me with the same awkward sympathy reserved for the family's underachiever. Uncle Robert asked if I'd found a real job yet. Cousin Melissa made a point of mentioning she could pass along some leads if I needed work. Throughout the cocktail hour, I smiled and deflected, playing my familiar role. Dinner began with Caroline commanding center stage, directing seating arrangements that placed me at the far end of the table, nearly separate from the main family group. As appetizers arrived, she stood for the first of what would be many toasts. Daddy, you gave us everything growing up, the best schools, the best opportunities. Thanks to your example, I've been able to build a life that makes you proud. The house in Beacon Hill, the partnerships at the firm, your beautiful grandchildren in the right schools. She raised her glass, diamond bracelet catching the light. Some of us took your lessons about hard work and planning to heart. Her gaze drifted meaningfully toward me. Several relatives shifted uncomfortably, while others nodded in agreement. Mom patted Caroline's hand approvingly. Throughout the meal, the pattern continued. Caroline orchestrated conversations highlighting family successes, her children's private school achievements, James's new position as department head, their summer plans for the house on Nantucket. Each accomplishment was paired with a subtle dig at my perceived lack of security. Alex still rents that same apartment in Somerville, right? She asked during the main course. So brave living in that neighborhood. I couldn't imagine not building equity, but I suppose that's the artistic temperament, living in the moment. When Dad mentioned my recent illustration series that had been featured in a design magazine, Caroline immediately redirected. Speaking of publications, James was just featured in the New England Journal of Medicine, front page article. The waitstaff, who had been briefed about their actual boss being at the table, maintained perfect professionalism while showing me subtle deference, placing my dishes first, ensuring my wine glass was never empty. Caroline noticed these small courtesies and frowned. "They must think you're someone else," she whispered when a waiter rushed to help me with my chair. "Or maybe they feel sorry for you." The tension built through dessert, as Caroline described the special reserve Bordeaux she'd selected for the final toast. It's $500 a bottle, but Daddy deserves the best. Thomas approached with the wine, presenting the bottle first to me rather than to Caroline, following standard protocol for the owner. Caroline interceded, reaching for the bottle. "I selected this specifically. Please serve my father first, then the rest of the table." Thomas glanced briefly at me, receiving my slight nod to proceed according to Caroline's wishes. As the dessert plates were cleared, Caroline stood for the gift presentation. One by one, family members presented their offerings: golf equipment, custom cufflinks, weekend getaways. Each gift was met with Caroline's evaluation. "How thoughtful," or "Dad will love using this at the club." When my turn came, Caroline's smile turned saccharine. And now, Alex would like to give Dad her gift. She's been very mysterious about it. I handed Dad a simple envelope. "Just a small token for now. The real gift arrives tomorrow." Caroline laughed lightly. "Oh, don't oversell it, Alex. Dad knows it's the thought that counts." Dad opened the card, reading my simple message. "The Mustang arrives at noon. Happy 60th. Love, Alex." His eyes widened. "What Mustang?" Caroline jumped in. "Oh, Alex probably found a model car or something crafty. She's always been good with those little projects." The moment hung in the air as the server approached with the check presenter. According to my standing instructions, it should have been brought directly to me, but a new server, clearly unaware of the situation, placed it in the center of the table. Caroline reached for it immediately. "I've got this part," she announced. "My treat." She opened the leather folio and her face registered shock at the total, nearly $7,000 for our party of 16. Recovering quickly, she slipped her platinum card into the folder and handed it back with a flourish. What happened next was entirely unplanned. As the evening wound down, I went to retrieve my coat from the cloakroom. My black card fell from my clutch onto the floor near our table. Uncle Robert picked it up, eyes widening at the unmistakable weight and design of the invitation-only card. "Alex, I think you dropped your— Wait, this can't be yours." He turned the card over, examining it with confusion. Caroline snatched it from his hand. "It's obviously fake, one of those prepaid cards designed to look fancy." She laughed. Alex's attempt to look successful. How embarrassing. The server returned at that exact moment, looking uncomfortable. Ms. Bennett, I'm sorry, but there seems to be an issue with your card. Caroline's face flushed crimson as she motioned the server closer. There must be some mistake, she hissed. Run it again. I'm sorry, ma'am. We've tried twice. The card was declined. A heavy silence fell over the table. Caroline fumbled in her purse. I'll use a different card. This is ridiculous. Dad started to reach for his wallet. Let me take care of it, sweetheart. It's my birthday after all. Absolutely not, Caroline snapped, her composure cracking. I said I would handle this. Thomas appeared beside our table, his expression professionally neutral. Is there a problem with the bill? Caroline thrust her second card at him. Try this one. The first had a temporary hold from another purchase. While Thomas discreetly took the card, he glanced at me. I gave an almost imperceptible nod. It was time. Perhaps, Thomas suggested carefully, Ms. Alexandra would like to handle the bill. The table went silent. Caroline laughed sharply. Alex, that's your solution? She probably has about $50 to her name. I reached for my fallen black card, still in Caroline's hand. May I? This is ridiculous, Caroline scoffed, but surrendered the card. Go ahead, embarrass yourself when this fake gets declined too. I handed the card to Thomas. The usual arrangement, please. He nodded. Of course, Miss Bennett. As always, it's been our pleasure to serve you and your family tonight. Caroline's mouth opened and closed silently as Thomas disappeared with my card. What does he mean, as always? Mom finally asked, breaking the silence. I took a deep breath. 10 years of secrets balanced on the edge of exposure. Part of me wanted to create an excuse, to maintain the peace and my privacy. But Caroline's smirk as she waited for my humiliation tipped the scales. He means, I said quietly, that as the owner of this restaurant, I'm usually not charged. Dad's fork clattered against his dessert plate. Owner? Alexandra, what are you talking about? Caroline recovered first. This is absurd. Another one of your fantasies. You can barely afford your rent, and you expect us to believe you own Montclair's? The reservations here are impossible unless you have connections. Thomas returned, handling my card back with deference. Everything is taken care of, Miss Bennett. Will you be joining us for the management meeting on Tuesday, or would you prefer to receive the quarterly reports by email as usual? The trap was sprung. I could almost see the gears turning in everyone's minds, reassessing a decade of interactions. Tuesday is fine, Thomas. Please add a 20% bonus for all staff working tonight. The service was excellent. Caroline's face had gone from red to ashen. This is some kind of joke. You put him up to this. It's not a joke, Caroline. I turned to face my family. I've owned Montclair's for 2 years. I also own the Harborview in Providence, Maple and Vine in Portland, and 12 other restaurants across New England. But how? Mom stammered. Your little drawings. You said you were freelancing. I sold my first app design during senior year at RSID for $150,000. My design firm was acquired 6 years ago. I'm the principal investor in a hospitality group and a venture capital fund specializing in medical technology. I kept my voice level, stating facts without emotion. I've been a multimillionaire since I was 26. The shock around the table was palpable. Uncle Robert choked on his wine. Cousin Melissa's husband whispered something in her ear. Dad looked completely bewildered. Caroline found her voice, sharp with disbelief. If that were true, why would you live in that dumpy apartment? Drive that old Toyota? Let us think you were struggling all these years? The question hung in the air. I looked directly at her for the first time that night, really looked at her. Because the moment I showed any success, it became a competition for you. Because you needed me to be the family failure to be the family success. Because I wanted to know if anyone in this family would ever be proud of me for something other than my bank account. Dad started to speak, but I continued. The Mustang arriving tomorrow isn't a model, Dad. It's a fully restored 1965 convertible, identical to the one you had in college, the one you sold to pay for Caroline's braces. I stood up, gathering my purse. I bought the brownstone on Commonwealth Avenue last year, the one Mom always admired. I was going to gift it to you both for retirement. Now I'm not so sure. Caroline's face contorted. You're lying. This is some elaborate scheme to embarrass me. Thomas approached again, this time with a bottle of champagne and a business card. Ms. Bennett, the '08 Cristal you reserved. And Mr. Harrington called about the property in Martha's Vineyard. He said the papers are ready when you are. I took the card. Thank you, Thomas. Please give my regrets to the kitchen staff. I won't be staying for coffee. Mom reached for my arm. Alexandra, please. We had no idea. Why wouldn't you tell us? You never asked, Mom. You were too busy asking Caroline about her promotions and James about his practice. I gently removed her hand. 10 years, and not once did anyone actually want to know what I was really doing with my life. I turned to leave, then paused, looking back at my father. His eyes were damp, confusion and hurt evident on his face. It was the only moment in the evening I regretted. Happy birthday, Dad. The Mustang will still come tomorrow. That gift was always just about you and me. I walked out of Montclair's, hearing the explosion of voices behind me. Through the glass doors, I saw Dad stand suddenly, silencing the table with a raised hand. His expression was unreadable as he watched me leave. The aftermath was nuclear. My phone exploded with texts and calls before I even reached my car. Caroline called 17 times that night, her messages evolving from fury, "How dare you humiliate me like that?" to faux concern, "We're worried about you, Alex," to desperate bargaining, "We need to talk about the brownstone," by morning. I turned off my notifications and drove to my actual home, not the modest Somerville apartment my family believed I lived in, but my waterfront penthouse in Seaport. Mark, my business partner and closest confidant, was waiting with an open bottle of whiskey. "So," he said, pouring me a glass, "the Bennett family secret is out. How does it feel?" "Like jumping off a cliff," I admitted. "Terrifying, liberating. I'm not sure I've hit the ground yet." Mark had witnessed a decade of family dinners that left me hollow, holiday gatherings where I played the designated failure. He'd been pushing me to come clean for years. "Your father called me," he said quietly, "twice." That surprised me. Dad had met Mark only once, at a gallery showing years ago. He'd barely acknowledged him then. What did he say? He asked if it was all true. Then he asked if you were okay. Mark swirled his whiskey. He sounded broken, Alex. The Mustang was delivered to my parents' house at noon the next day, as promised. The delivery service sent confirmation photos. Dad standing beside it, looking shell-shocked, one hand resting on the gleaming red hood. He looked older somehow, diminished. I maintained radio silence for 3 days, letting the dust settle while sorting through my own complicated emotions. On the 4th day, an unexpected visitor arrived at my penthouse, Uncle Robert. "Your doorman nearly didn't let me up," he said, stepping into my living room with wide eyes. "Impressive security." "How did you find me?" I asked, genuinely curious. "I'm still a real estate attorney, Alex. Finding property records is my job." He walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Boston Harbor. "This is quite a view." "What do you want, Uncle Robert?" He turned, his expression serious. "Your father hasn't spoken since your birthday. Not a word to anyone. Your mother is beside herself. Caroline is spiraling. And this concerns me how? Because they're still your family, Alex, and families can be deeply flawed without being worthless." That landed harder than I expected. Uncle Robert had always been the family pragmatist, never particularly warm, but never cruel either. "There's something you should know," he continued. "Your father turned down a partnership at Morton and Hayes when you were 11. It would have doubled his income, but the hours would have meant missing your art classes. He never told anyone why he stayed at the smaller firm." I sat down, suddenly unsteady. That can't be right. Dad always pushed me toward business, toward practical careers. Because he saw how good you were with numbers, same as him. He thought he was protecting you from struggling like he did. Uncle Robert shrugged. Parents rarely explain their fears to their children. After he left, I found myself driving to my parents' house in Wellesley. The Mustang sat in the driveway, immaculately detailed but clearly unmoved since delivery. I parked behind it and sat for long minutes, gathering courage. Mom answered the door, her eyes red-rimmed. Alexandra. She seemed afraid to embrace me, as if I'd become a stranger. Dad sat in his study, staring at nothing. When I entered, he looked up, his expression unreadable. "The car is perfect," he said finally. "Exactly like my old one. Even has the same cigarette burn on the passenger seat. I have good researchers." He nodded, then asked the question I'd been dreading. "Why, Alex? Why the deception?" We talked for hours. Really talked, perhaps for the first time in my adult life. About his disappointment when I chose art school. Not because he thought less of my choice, but because he feared for my security. About how my mother's social anxiety translated into status consciousness. About Caroline's deep-seated insecurity, always needing to prove herself the best. After your first gallery showing, when those illustrations sold out, I was so proud, Dad confessed. I kept one of the newspaper clippings in my wallet. I never said anything because Caroline was so upset that night. She'd been passed over for promotion that same week. That revelation stung. All these years of believing no one noticed or cared. I should have told you about the abseil, I admitted. But after years of being the family disappointment, there was something freeing about lowered expectations. No pressure to be perfect like Caroline. Dad's eyes filled. "We did that to you. Compared you constantly. I never realized how much damage we were causing." When Mom joined us later, bringing coffee with shaking hands, the conversation broadened. I learned that her persistent focus on Caroline's achievements came from her own mother's relentless criticism. She'd transferred that pressure without recognizing the pattern. "I always thought you were happier without all that pressure," she confessed. "You seemed so content with your art, while Caroline was always striving, never satisfied." 2 days later, I faced Caroline. She'd requested to meet at a small cafe, neutral territory. She arrived impeccably dressed as always, but with dark circles her expensive concealer couldn't quite hide. "James is talking about divorce," she said without preamble. "He says I've become obsessed with status, that I'm teaching the children toxic values." I'm sorry to hear that. And surprisingly, I meant it. Caroline stared into her untouched coffee. "Is it true about the brownstone? On Commonwealth?" "Yes." "Were you really going to give it to Mom and Dad?" "Yes." She looked up, eyes brimming. "Do you hate me that much, Alex? Was it all some elaborate revenge plot, making me look foolish in front of everyone?" The question caught me off guard. "I don't hate you, Caroline. I just got tired of being the designated failure." "But you weren't failing. You were succeeding beyond anything any of us ever did. Why hide that?" The conversation that followed was painful, raw, and necessary. Caroline's perfect life was built on quicksand. Crushing mortgage debt, James's gambling problem, private school tuitions they could barely afford. The designer clothes were bought on credit, the luxury vacations funded by home equity loans. "Everything had to be perfect," she whispered. "Mom and Dad sacrificed so much for our education. I couldn't let them think it was wasted." The irony wasn't lost on either of us. Over the following months, a careful reconstruction began. Dad started driving the Mustang, taking it on long rides where he'd invite me along. During those drives, we rebuilt a relationship based on who we actually were, not who we'd pretended to be. Mom struggled more with the adjustment, still occasionally slipping into status comparisons before catching herself. But she made genuine efforts, asking about my business decisions and actually listening to the answers. As for the brownstone on Commonwealth Avenue, I didn't give it to my parents after all. Instead, I established a family trust that included provisions for all of us. My parents could live there if they chose, but the property would eventually become a small foundation supporting arts education for underprivileged kids. Caroline's marriage survived, barely. The exposure of my financial status forced her to confront her own unhealthy relationship with money and status. She and James entered counseling, downsized their home, and began the slow process of rebuilding on honesty rather than appearances. The most unexpected development came 6 months later. Caroline approached me with a business proposition. Her corporate experience, combined with my creative background, launching a consulting firm specializing in corporate culture transformation. Her expertise in traditional business models complemented my innovative approach. We began cautiously collaborating, discovering a synergy neither of us had anticipated. "We could have been doing this for years," she said during one late-night planning session. "Think of the time we wasted competing." "We're not competing anymore," I reminded her. "That's what matters." At Dad's 61st birthday, a simple backyard barbecue, his choice, he raised a toast that brought tears to my eyes. "To my daughters, who taught an old accountant that balance sheets never show what really matters." And to second chances at getting family right. Later, as we watched Mom showing Caroline's kids how to perfect her secret marinade recipe, Dad leaned against the Mustang's polished fender. "You know what's funny, Alex? All those years I worried about you struggling financially, and you're the one who ended up teaching us all about real wealth." He nodded toward our family gathered around the grill. "This kind." It's been 2 years since that explosive night at Montclair's. I still own the restaurant, though I visit more openly now. Thomas still manages the place brilliantly, and occasionally shares a laugh with me about the night, now legendary among the staff. The family trust has funded art programs in 3 Boston public schools. Dad volunteers there sometimes, teaching kids basic accounting alongside their art classes. His idea of a perfect balance. Mom has discovered a talent for event coordination at the foundation's fundraisers, channeling her social skills towards something meaningful. Caroline and I still have our moments of tension, old habits resurfacing, but our business partnership continues to thrive, each of us finally appreciating the other's strengths. Her children now spend weekends at my place occasionally, the older one showing promising artistic talent that Caroline actively encourages. As for me, the freedom of living authentically has been worth every uncomfortable conversation, every painful revelation. I've learned that wealth isn't just what you accumulate, but what you're willing to share. Not just money, but truth, vulnerability, forgiveness. Sometimes I think about that black card falling to the floor, such a small accident triggering such monumental change. It makes me wonder how many other families are trapped in cycles of misunderstanding, waiting for their own catalyzing moment. If there's anything I've learned from this journey, it's that the facades we construct to protect ourselves often become the very prisons that isolate us. True connection requires the courage to be seen, fully, honestly, imperfectly. What family secrets are you keeping? What truths might set you free? I never imagined that my most valuable asset would be the courage to finally be myself. If you found something meaningful in my story, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. Subscribe for more real-life journeys of transformation, and remember, sometimes the most powerful thing you can be isn't rich or successful, but simply authentic.